Let's start with a hard truth that actually removes pressure. Most people aren't failing because they don't know what to do. They're failing because they're trying to apply the right tools at the wrong time. Think about this. You didn't decide to lose your patience at that moment. You didn't plan to shut down, avoid, or overreact, or even spiral. Those decisions are already made before you feel like you're making them. And that's why it's so frustrating. Because afterwards, when you replay that, you can actually see what you should have done. You think, I had awareness. I knew better. I've worked on this. So why didn't it work? Because awareness alone doesn't change outcomes when your system is already activated. This episode is about understanding why your best intentions keep losing the vote and how to change the outcome without relying on willpower, motivation, or forcing growth. Now, if you've ever said, I don't understand why I still do this, my friends, this episode's for you. Why this isn't a motivational problem? Before I want to go any further, I want to remove one assumption. This is not about effort. It's not about discipline. It's not about commitment. Most of the people listening to this care deeply about change. They reflect. They self-analyze. They want to do better. And that's exactly why this hurts. Because the gap isn't between caring and not caring. The gap's between clarity in calm moments and assessing under pressure. You're not failing at change. You're misapplying when change is supposed to happen. So here's what usually happens. You'll have a moment of clarity. Maybe a conversation, maybe after journaling, maybe after listening to something that lands. You feel grounded, centered, certain. You think, next time, I'm going to respond differently. Next time, I won't get pulled in. Next time, I'm going to slow down. And you mean it. And then, well, life applies that pressure. You're tired, rushed, emotionally loaded. Someone pushes that button or something unexpected happens. And suddenly, clarity just disappears. Not because it was fake. Not because you didn't want it bad enough. But because clarity does not survive stress unless it's been trained there. That's why people just start turning on themselves. They think, why can't I hold on to this? Why do I lose access to everything I know? And I've said it before, the answer is not personal, it's mechanical. You don't have one self. You have different states. Now, this is a critical distinction. You are not one consistent version of yourself. You are a system of many different states. And your system moves through these different states. You're calm. You're in a state of focus. You might be in a state of defense. Maybe you're in a state of overwhelm. Maybe you're in a state of shutdown. And each state, when you're feeling them, they're going to have different priorities. They're going to have different emotional thresholds. They're going to have different access to the logic and to restraint. But here's the key. When one state is active, all the other ones are kind of temporarily unavailable. So when people say, I don't know why I forgot everything I learned, what they're really experiencing is a state-dependent access. Nothing was wrong. It just wasn't available. You don't rise to your intentions. You default to your most trained state under pressure. And this makes those patterns really feel automatic. Patterns don't don't feel strong because they're bad. They feel strong because they're efficient. Now, when your emotion rises, your system wants speed, certainty, and relief. And patterns, they provide all three. They remove decision making. They reduce that inner conflict. They promise that known outcome. And even if that outcome creates regret later. That is why people repeat behaviors they consciously dislike. The system is choosing familiar relief over uncertain growth. Not because it's broken, but because it's protective. And when you begin to force change, it makes it worse. This is where many people accidentally deepen the pattern. They notice the reaction and respond with pressure. I need to stop this. I can't keep doing this. I should be past this. And that pressure, what it does is it signals threat. And threat increases activation, and activation strengthens that default response. So you begin to push harder than the less access you actually have. That's why intensity doesn't work. That's why emotional promises fail. That's why people feel like they just keep resetting. My friends, change doesn't come from overpowering the system. It comes from lowering the system's need to defend itself. And this is where real change actually happens. Right? Change does not happen in the moment you're triggered. This is for containment, not transformation. You're trying to alleviate the pain that you're in to get back to the pleasure you want to be in. Real change happens earlier in the day, outside that emotional spike, in the calm, repeatable environments. You're not training outcomes. You're training access. You're teaching your system this pace is available. The response exists. The state is safe. And then over time, the system starts offering new options automatically. Not because you force them, but because you feel familiar enough to try them. So I want to give you a weekly practice which is going to help change the conditions that you're fighting through. So again, this week, don't try to stop anything. Instead, pay attention. Step 1, I want you to identify the entry point. You kind of complete the sentence. When I am blank, this pattern shows up. When I'm tired, this pattern shows up. When I'm rushed, this pattern shows up. When I'm emotionally loaded, this pattern shows up. When I'm unappreciated, this pattern shows up. This is going to tell you when it's time to intervene. And then when you know when it's time to intervene, you want to train calm on purpose. So once per day, when nothing's wrong, prior to this feeling, slow your breathing. Drop your shoulders, relax your jaw, listen to your heart. You are building a reference state so that when you feel that, you know where to go. And step 3 is you want to delay instead of correct. So when that pattern starts, pause, breathe, change your posture. The win is interruption. It's not perfection. You're changing who you are in that moment. Then you have a new definition of progress. Here's what it actually looks like. You'll begin to notice sooner. You begin to recover faster. You begin to judge yourself less. And that's not failure. That's retraining. And when you're doing this retraining, that's when it's going to change your life. So my friends, if this episode gave language to something you felt but couldn't explain, I'm going to continue the conversation live this Wednesday on the Facebook page of why you act one way but want to be another. And then this Friday, we're going live. I'm going to go live on YouTube on an episode that I called Full Life Reset Workshop 2026. We're going to talk about identity, mindset, emotions, and then your habits. My friends, you don't need more effort. You need better timing. And once timing changes, your old patterns stop running you and start losing their authority. I'll see you on a future call.